It's time for me to say something about the Charlie Kirk situation. The truth is, I've been waiting. I've been a little bit hesitant. I haven't wanted to speak too soon, but it is time for me to say something about this situation. I don't want to just say anything. I don't want to repeat what everybody else is saying. And in fact, I'm going to say a couple of things today that I don't think hardly anybody is saying. I want you to make sure you watch all the way to the end, because I'm going to say some things that might not be popular, but I really passionately believe need to be said. I've got 5 reflections that I want to share about this history pivoting moment that we've all just witnessed with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. The first thing I want to say is, I think you've got your head in the sand if you believe that the shooter acted alone. As far as I'm concerned, I cannot find the possibility of reason without evidence, sure, but I can't find the possibility of reason how this young man acted alone. I'm quite certain in my heart that he was put up to it, that it was arranged, and I'm sure that in due course, more and more information is going to come out about the fact that this was orchestrated, this was organised, there was a premeditated agenda against a man who was making a difference. And that's why I believe that this shooter did not act alone. You see, there is a force at work in the world, and that force is represented by a certain kind of person. And the reason they killed Charlie Kirk is because they hated his words. And the reason they hated his words is because his words were changing the world. That's what they hated. That's why they came out after him. And I don't believe for a single moment that this young man, this shooter, that he acted alone. I believe it was orchestrated, and I believe the facts are going to come to the surface. The second reflection I've got is, you have to be in complete denial to ignore the massive global response that this has kickstarted. We are talking about protests, we're talking about prayer meetings, we're talking about new movements, we're talking about thousands of applications for new chapters for Turning Point USA in America. We're talking about the multiplication of a message like nobody believed was possible. You see, the people who arranged for this murder, for this killing in broad daylight, I'm sure in their hearts, they believed that if they could kill the man, they could kill the message. What we're actually seeing take place globally is that sometimes if you kill a good man, you don't kill his message, you multiply his message. And we are seeing the multiplication of a message that has to run globally. I am particularly excited about the fact that we are seeing the mobilization of young men across the globe who are standing up and saying, not only is this wrong, this is deliberate, this is hateful, this is shocking, and we are not going to sit in silence and do nothing about this. And so we haven't seen one single event be the catalyst on a global scale like this for decades, and you've got to pay attention to that nuanced principle at the core of the response. It's not just people being outraged, it's the fact that when you kill a man who is a good man of character, a man who loved family, a man who loved God, a man who wanted his own country and the whole world to be a better place, when you kill a man like that, or a woman, but when you kill a man like that, you don't kill his message, you multiply his message. And I don't think we've seen anywhere near the fullness of how far and how wide this message is going to run. I think it's just getting started, to be honest. My third reflection is possibly the most powerful and most important. If you had the chance to watch any of the clips or the whole of the memorial service, you probably would agree with me that the epicenter of that entire ceremony was the powerful words of Erica Kirk when she looked towards heaven, and with a broken heart and a clean soul, she uttered these words and said, "I forgive that young man." Folks, we are not used to seeing forgiveness on this scale and forgiveness at this level of lack of comprehension. Our human minds do not have the capacity to understand how a person could release forgiveness to a person like that. But it points to the fact that there is a greater power at work in this woman's life. What an incredibly courageous and brave act she has displayed to the whole world. Unbelievable pressure on her in the aftermath of her husband, the father of her children, being hatefully murdered for what he stood for. And then on the back of that, she's had to stand up for the organisation he represented, the message that he was conveying, and to be in the global spotlight as we've seen few other people in history. And in that moment, she had a choice. She could have spewed forth revenge and her own hatred and her brokenness and her grief and all the rest of it. But instead of that, she chose that moment to say, I'm going to release forgiveness. And you have to ask the question, how? How could she do it? How did she find it within herself to say those words and to actually mean it? Well, the simple truth is this, that in our own humanity, not a single one of us have the capacity to release forgiveness at that level and in that high-pressured situation. I'm not sure I could have done it, but she did. And it points to the fact that the greater power that is at work in her life and in her heart is the same power that her husband talked about often, and that is a life surrendered to God, surrendered to following Jesus. And this lady has demonstrated the exact same thing, that with his help, with his grace, with his empowerment, the impossible becomes possible. And she just showed the way for the world to be healed, and that is to allow the forgiveness of God that touches each of our hearts to be released to other people's hearts. That's the way it can work. And I am in total agreement with what I've seen over social media, where people have posted about the fact that there is one group of people, when they experience injustice, their response is to burn buildings and to set cars on fire and to riot and run wild through the streets, bringing anarchy to the neighbourhood. And yet here we see this completely polar opposite brand of response from a different group of people, and their response is prayer, forgiveness, reflection, complete opposite. And you do have to pay attention and say, what is the difference? The only difference, the only explainer that's possible is the presence of a real and living God at work in the hearts of those people to be able to respond that way. I want to get to what I said at the top of this episode, that I was going to reflect on a couple of statements that I don't think are being said in the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk assassination. Lots of things are being said, but one or two are not being said a whole lot, and I want to say them with conviction and with strength. And the first one is this: we have to understand that what took place over the past week or so was not just a political assassination. Was it that? 100% it was that. But it was even bigger than political. It was ideological. It was about killing a man's words, or so they tried, as I mentioned a few moments ago. But something far more sinister, something far more evil and powerful is at play here. And we cannot change the future until we individually and collectively are willing to acknowledge that something else is going on in this situation. And the other thing that's going on is the very real presence and reality of a spiritual realm that is at work in the earth. I don't really mind what your history and your background is on this subject. I don't really mind what your reflections are in the last couple of weeks. As far as I'm concerned, I am utterly convinced and cannot be persuaded away from the belief, and I believe the truth, that there is a spiritual realm at work here, and what is driving what we've just witnessed is a spirit of hatred in the earth. You have to be utterly blind in your soul to believe that we are not witnessing the fight of good versus evil. the fight of light versus dark. It's been going on for millennia, and it's still going on now. Did we see something disgraceful and abhorrent through the life of an individual? Of course we did. Do we suspect that other people have premeditated these actions and been part of the planning? I certainly do. But we've got to go deeper and further than that and realize that there are spiritual forces and entities that are energizing these actions from these people. There is a spiritual realm. There is an evil realm. There are spirits of hatred and murder that are roaming free in the earth. Whether that's too much for you to cope with and whether your understanding can digest that is not really my responsibility to carry. But it is my responsibility to bring this message that is not being spoken about enough, even in places where it should be getting spoken about, and that is the world of Christianity and church leaders, and I'm coming to that in a moment's time. But we have to understand there are spiritual powers at work in the world, in the earth, and this has been an expression of darkness at its height. And unless you deal with the spiritual realm, you cannot change the earthly realm. There is a spiritual realm, and we are seeing a spirit of hatred, not just in the Charlie Kirk situation, but what is going on in the Middle East, what is going on in many countries around the world, a spirit of hatred where man will turn against man is dominating in the earth, and the only answer is the opposite spirit. And it's the same spirit that caused this brave, courageous woman to stand in front of the world and say, I forgive that young man. I want to say one more thing as a reflection on this situation and this moment in history around Charlie Kirk, and that is that I want to speak to Christian leaders for a moment. It's so important that Christian leaders get their response right in this hour. There's a few different ways that they could misstep and get their response wrong. One of the things that I've seen on social media, which I think is an overreach, I've seen Christian leaders with a good intention posting comments and saying to other Christian leaders, if you didn't speak up about Charlie Kirk in your weekend worship services, you are disqualified from being a minister. Well, let me take a moment to speak directly to that. First of all, I believe that's a massive overreach. It is not the role of any individual to dictate to other individuals how they should respond, when they should respond, and why they should respond. Each individual has to carry that responsibility themselves. So it would be better for all of us if we focused on our own heart, our own reflections, and how we are going to respond as a result of this situation, rather than trying to control what other people do. But primarily, and more to the point of what I want to say to Christian leaders in this hour, it is so crucial that we do not respond by believing that what is needed right now is a surge of political activism. Because that's what could happen. We could see the Christian world rise up, so to speak, and become warriors in the political space and believe that they're going to take over the world with aggressive, militant political activism. That is not the answer. That is not the response we need to see. I want to qualify what I believe is right concerning the world of Christianity and Christian leaders and the political world. I have never believed in this old adage of the separation of church and state. It's not biblical, it's not useful, it's not helpful. Actually, what should take place is that Christian people, Christian leaders, should keep themselves highly aware of what is going on in the world politically, socially, economically, every level of society, and they should have a comment about what's going on in the world. If you don't open your mouth, you can't bear influence on anything. And so Christians and Christian leaders should be unafraid to say what they believe and what they think. We have lived through a recent era where people have been bullied into a corner of silence, and if this moment in history doesn't bring you out of that silent corner, probably nothing ever will. We need to break our addiction to being liked and being popular and getting thumbs up on our social posts and get out there and actually say what we believe. However, we do need to stop short of aggressive, militant political activism. That is not the answer. Rather than a movement of political activism, what we need to see in this hour is a movement of a return to prayer. Christian leaders and Christian people the world over need, by the millions and the hundreds of millions, need to fall to their face, get back on their knees and seek God and pray. The way the world is right now, the hour that we're living in, unless we have a massive global return to Bible values of love and forgiveness and compassion and living the way Jesus Christ lived, unless we see that, then the world will simply regress to where we've been in the past. It is the only answer that people turn to prayer and start with turning their own heart to God. This has happened many times before in history. In fact, if you research your history, you'll realize that the greatest moments in history where the world turned away from evil and turned towards good and what is right was preceded by hundreds and thousands of men and women turning their hearts to God, putting their knees on the ground in prayer and appealing to heaven to come and change the way things are. And we need to see it again. In fact, even in my lifetime, I've had the privilege of standing with my American brothers and sisters in prayer meetings of that nature. I remember 25 years ago being invited to be part of the planning and the operation of a massive prayer meeting in Washington, where on the Washington Mall we put out a call for people of all ages to come and seek God for what was going on in America at that time. And on that prayer event on that day, we saw close to 400,000 people turn up from not just over America, but all across the world. Personally, I took a group of 90 young people and some of their parents from here in Sydney, Australia, all the way to Washington. And we had the privilege of joining in that day, and I had the privilege of speaking on stage and leading some of that prayer. And it's those kinds of moments that we desperately need in the world again. So, Christian leaders, let me say it clear, and I hope that you can receive this message with the heart that it's being conveyed with. Also, Christian people, not just leaders and pastors, our response should not be political activism. Our response needs to be prayer and love and speaking up with the truth for a broken and lost world. You see, there's two extremes that we are in danger of. The first extreme that we're in danger of is that Christian people say nothing. They stay in their silent corner because they're addicted to being liked on social media. If we stay in our silent corner, we will leave a void in a moment in time, and into that void, into that vacuum will come a message of judgment and harshness and aggression that is not the answer. The other extreme is that we react and we respond and we become like political activists, and we will get the same result. Judgmentalism, harshness, lack of compassion, not the message that Jesus came to the earth to spread. The answer is found in the beautiful middle. And the beautiful middle is that with compassion, with broken hearts, for the way the world is, we are moved to go to our knees in prayer. We are moved to stand from the place of prayer and speak the truth, but speak it with love. We cannot respond to hatred with hatred. We don't win this war by hating those who are on the left, so to speak. Yes, we are called to hate the sin, but even on that front, the Bible calls us to hate the sin within before we hate the sin in others. Hate the sin within, hate the sin on the outside, love and pray even for those who seem the most broken, the most lost, the most energized by hatred in this hour. I would love to see more people respond that way. I'd love to hear your comments on this subject. Do you agree with what I've said in today's video? Do you disagree? Have you got a different take? Do you believe that my last 2 points need to be spoken about more often? I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to get you involved in the conversation.